Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about what I call the Sun Wukong Effect. Now, every single time that Plarium has released a free login legendary, like Sun Wukong, like Ronda or Artak or Ninja, each of those champions instantly becomes the most popular legendary in the entire game. After 7 days, every single player who is actively playing Raid owns this champion. That's never true for any other champion in the game, not even the starter champions, because there are 4 different starter champions. So when you have a champion like Wukong who is literally on every account in the game, it can't help but change the team compositions, the tactics, the builds, the priorities of all of the players at early game, at mid game, even at late game. So for this video, we're going to dive into the effect that I think Wukong is currently having on the game. There are a lot of different aspects to this. It's going to give you some ideas about maybe ways you can use Wukong that you haven't thought of yet, or ways you can minimize his influence if you find him particularly annoying in places like PvP. All right, so let's get started with the Sun Wukong Effect. Just a quick note before we get started, Colred Plays just hit 2,000 subscribers. We actually did that yesterday during our live stream. It was a really fun moment. So I just want to thank everybody out there, all of our subscribers, for helping to support the channel. Now, we have a goal of trying to hit 5,000 subscribers by the end of 2023. So if you are interested in helping us reach that goal, please click the like button of this video and any of our videos that you watch and enjoy. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel so that can help us reach our 5K goal. So once again, thanks to everybody for all of the support. I really appreciate all the positive comments in the videos and in the Discord community. It's been a great ride so far, and we intend to keep it going. All right, now let's take a look at this crazy monkey here. I love his visuals. He's always so much fun. But very briefly, I know everybody has this champion. I just want to cover his kit really quickly. So he has a stun on his A1. It has a decent chance of landing when booked of 50%. But a lot of us run Sun Wukong unbooked, so there is something that you want to consider here. Are you running him booked or not? We're going to talk about maybe some of the effects that that has in the game. Now, on his A2, this is a single target hit, but it hits very hard. It ignores 50% of the target's defense, and then if the target is killed, you get splash damage onto the rest of the team. Again, if you've run Wukong in Arena, or if you've come up against Wukong in Arena, you've seen this splash damage. It can be significant in terms of softening up a team or finishing off a weakened team. So it's a very good skill just for that part of the ability. But in addition to that, if the initial target survives, this will place a sheep debuff on them for 1 turn, and this debuff cannot be blocked. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be resisted, but it can't be blocked. So that's important. You can just throw this at a champion that has a block buffs debuff on them, and you're still going to sheep that champion. And that's a pretty amazingly powerful CC. It can be very useful. The A3 is the big AoE, but in addition to being a hard-hitting AoE, this also steals all buffs from all enemies and then places a block buffs debuff on them for 2 turns. It does this before attacking. Now that means that you can steal increase attack buffs, increase crit rate buffs, increase crit damage buffs, and actually buff Wukong for more damage by stealing the enemy's buffs. Now, that's not always the case if he's going first, say before the enemies put up any buffs. But this is something you can use tactically to not only remove those buffs from the enemy, but potentially strengthen Wukong and do more damage. Remember, this is before attacking. So any steals will actually impact the damage of this skill on its first usage. Then we have this crazy passive, which revives this champion with 100% HP and 100% turn meter 3 turns after they were killed. And we have found out, everybody's found out, that this is not 3 of Sun Wukong's turns, but just 3 champion turns. Whether that's your allies or your enemies, it doesn't matter. So Wukong pops up really quickly. 3 turns is not a long death wait. So if you're going up against him in Arena, this is something that you have to plan around. He becomes very influential there. And if you are using him, this enables a lot of different strategies that maybe you haven't thought about yet, and we'll get into more of those as the video continues. Finally, we have an aura that increases ally speed in arena battles by 28%. That is a very large speed aura. It's the 3rd fastest, I think, in the game. But it's very close to the 30% that Arbiter gives you. And you get it right out of the gate at day 7. So this is an incredible boon as well to a lot of players. Okay, so here I am on my relatively new account, my noob versus pro account. You can see I am level 53. I will show you, I think I'm about 56 or 57 days in. I'm on day 55. Okay, I'm on day 55. So one of the things that you may have noticed is that Sun Wukong has had a huge impact on the arena. But each area of the arena is a bit different, and Sun Wukong's impact on those areas has been different depending on if you're in bronze, silver, gold, high gold, platinum, live arena, 3v3. It's different everywhere. So let's just jump into the arena right here, and we can talk about what's going on with Sun Wukong in the arena. Now you can see I am in gold 2. Now I have been grinding up from silver for the last few weeks, and I am now comfortably in gold 2. You can see I'm not really close to gold 3 yet, but I'm living comfortably in gold 2 now. And I'm just going to show you my team. And in fact, I am running Sun Wukong. You can notice I am running Sun Wukong at level 50. Now, the great thing about running Sun Wukong at level 50 is that his aura doesn't get weaker because he's at level 50. His buff strip, like the removal of enemy buffs, doesn't get a lot weaker running him at 50. It would get a little bit stronger if I could run him at 60 and get an accuracy banner. But in general, he can do a very good job here as my aura lead and as my buff removal champion without any books and without being level 60. Now, this power makes him extremely useful in early game arena. So if you are in silver, my guess is you are seeing Wukong everywhere. I know that when I was in silver, I was seeing Wukong on almost every team. But now that I've gotten into gold 2 and I'm standing here, I find that I don't see Wukong nearly as much. If you look at this page, let's see, we don't see any Wukongs, no Wukongs. There's one Wukong down here at the bottom. So 10 teams, 1 Wukong. Let's go ahead and refresh the page and see about the next page. Say no Wukongs. Nope. No Wukongs at all on this page. When I was in silver 4, every single team had Wukong, or most teams had Wukong. Now, one of the things you'll notice on this particular page is that we see some of the previous login reward champions. We've got 2 Ultimate Death Knights right here. He was a login reward just like Wukong was. Here's an Artak. This is actually a solo Artak. And here's another UDK. You will also occasionally see Delianas. You may see Ninjas. You'll see some Rondas. So there are a bunch of login champions that end up populating lower level arena teams. And that's because, well, they're great legendaries, and a lot of them have a pretty strong build that's relatively easy to acquire in the early game for arena. So you can get the gear you need for those champions to be effective in early game arena. Wukong was everybody's first legendary for the most part, right? Most of us didn't pull a legendary before we got to 7 days. So Wukong was our first legendary. He's a natural 5-star, so he's going to start at level 50 for you. All you have to do is run him up, and he's going to live here in arena for you. But as you progress into gold arena, you are now coming up against players who've been in the game a little bit longer. So here I'm looking at the player at the top of this list. You can see that this player has 6.2 million player power. That is a huge jump up from the player power that you have early in the game. Now, I am 55 days in. Let's go and look at my player power. Okay, here's my player power. It is 534K. So 6.2 million versus 534K. Now, player power doesn't mean a whole lot, but at least in one way, it can indicate the longevity of an account. How long has this account been playing, and how many champions do they have? So as you can see, there's a massive difference between my player power and the player power of opponents I'm finding in Gold 2 Arena. But if you're like me and your player power is around 500,000 or less, chances are Wukong plays a serious role in your roster. He may in fact be your best champion. And as a result, he's in almost every silver arena team. All right, so now I want to talk about some effects, both in arena and in the game, that Sun Wukong has had on the overall experience of the new player and of players who maybe don't have a full roster yet, or even some players that might be in late game. We're going to talk about some effects even there. One of the things that I like to do when I'm thinking about how a champion or how a meta affects the overall experience, the overall culture of the game, the tactical culture of the game, is to think of changes as rising and falling stocks, right? Some things are becoming more valuable because of Sun Wukong. Some things are losing value because of Sun Wukong. And I'll give you an example. Everybody now has access to a very effective steel buff champion for the arena. Now, one of the ways that some players have tried to increase the survivability of their defensive teams is to build them in shield sets. Put at least one shield set on your defensive arena team, and that increases the survivability of that team, making them harder to take off the board in one go. And that gives your go second defense a chance to hit the enemy. But because everybody now has Sun Wukong, shield gear is not as useful in arena as it used to be. In fact, it's almost completely negated by a Sun Wukong with any level of accuracy. However, there is a better set that's actually gaining value in arena because of Sun Wukong. And that set is right here. This is the bolster set. Now, the bolster set is very similar to a shield set. In fact, it gives a protected 30% HP ally shield for 3 turns. That's the exact same as the shield set, except this buff is protected. And that's really important. That means that this buff cannot be removed by Sun Wukong. So as shield sets have become less valuable because of Sun Wukong, bolster sets have actually become more valuable because of Sun Wukong. In arena, you may still want that ally shield, but in a shield set just isn't worth it because you know Sun Wukong's going to completely negate the value of that shield, and you'd probably be better off building more resistance or more tankiness through a different set. But here, the bolster set not only gives you a protected ally shield, but it also gives you a regeneration set as well and heals you by 10% every turn, further emphasizing the tankiness of your go second team. Now, this is a harder set to acquire, but you may be seeing a lot more shield buffs with the yellow border on the buff symbol because people are using bolster sets. To a lesser extent, this idea also applies to the protection set. So the protection set gives an opportunity for any buffs that are placed to be protected. So protected buffs are rising in value, and therefore the sets that give you protected buffs are likewise rising in value. All because Sun Wukong is a universally accessible champion that strips buffs from targets. Now, in addition to sets changing values because of the entry of a very popular, very commonly accessible legendary champion like Wukong, champions can also rise and fall in value in relation to that new champion. For instance, Rhonda was a previous login reward champion. She's a good champion, and a lot of people used her like they use Wukong now very universally in Silver Arena, but then you see less and less of her as you climb up the ranks in Gold. However, Rhonda has one particular skill that has become increasingly valuable since Wukong has entered the game. That is her A2 phase rushdown. Now, this attacks an enemy 3 times and ignores shield buffs and 30% of the target's defense. That's great. It hits really hard. But better yet, it has a block passive skills debuff for 2 turns, and this debuff cannot be resisted. So what that means is you can drop this block passive skills on Wukong, and then as long as you kill him while this debuff is on Wukong, he will not revive himself. He will die with the debuff on, and he will not be able to come back. So if you're looking for counters for Wukong, champions like Rhonda all of a sudden are rising in value. And again, since she was a login champion, a lot of players still have her. Not everybody. She's not going to be as popular currently as Wukong is. But this is one of the commonly accessible counters to that problematic Wukong on the enemy team in Arena. Likewise, any champion who has a block revive mechanic can be highly useful. So if you see a Sun Wukong on the enemy team and you have a block revive somewhere on your roster, you might consider bringing that champion into your arena offense team when Wukong is on defense. Now, there's a category of champions that I think has also lost value because of Sun Wukong, and we've actually seen this before when Rhonda was introduced to the game. And that category of champions that is losing value is all arena nukers. Basically, any arena nuker that isn't top tier has become devalued because everybody at 7 days gets an arena nuker for free that they can use for a very long time. Now, you don't have to make Sun Wukong your nuker, but you can. And in fact, as you progress into the game and build up your roster, you may value potential arena nukers less than you would otherwise. So if you've pulled a Skull Crown recently, and Skull Crown is a very good arena nuker, you may not have built her out simply because you already have Sun Wukong. Now, you may have built Skullcrown anyway, but I'm not trying to say Skullcrown is not a good champion anymore or she shouldn't be built. My guess is simply that she's being built less frequently than she was before because of the presence of Sun Wukong. And that's true for every nuker in the game. Even really good nukers like, say, Kandrafan, Harima, Rotos, Leorius, all of those champions are amazing arena nukers who can be very valuable in different areas. But if you have a Sun Wukong who's already fully booked, fully geared out, you may think to yourself, well, I can wait on building my Kandrafan. I can wait on building my Leorius. I do want to build them eventually, maybe, but I don't have to right now. There's a different priority on my account, and I need to focus on getting, my clan boss team together, or I need to focus on something else because arena's already solved for me. Or at least my arena nuker is already solved for me. There's yet one more category of champions that I think are losing value in relation to where they were before Sun Wukong entered the game, and that is starter champions. I think if you've started with a champion like Elhain or maybe Athel or Gaelic, you may have chosen to 6-star Wukong as your first level 60 champion. You may bypass the starter champion for a while. You may actually never build them depending on how your account progresses with Sun Wukong as your lead carry. Now, we saw this when Ronda was introduced. We saw this a little bit when Artak was introduced. So champions that can do the job of an all-around carry for the beginning of the game definitely diminish the value of running that first starter champion up to level 60. And even though I think more players probably still 60 their starter champion than not, I'm sure that some players have not 60'd their starter champion and maybe never will. Okay, we've already talked about several things that became less valuable when Sun Wukong was introduced into the game. We've also talked about a few things that have become more valuable, like counters for Sun Wukong in Arena, or bolster sets because he can't remove the protected buff. However, there's another effect that happens, and this is maybe in some ways the greater effect, because we don't live in PvP. We actually do more PvE than PvP, and so far we've been talking primarily about PvP. So in the PvE world, we have a different set of priorities than we have in PvP. And in fact, Sun Wukong does a very different thing in PvE than he does in PvP. You may think, well, he's a nuker in both places, and he can be, absolutely. He can strip buffs in both places. Absolutely, he can. But the way you build a team composition early game, the way you look at solving specific problems from early game into mid game are going to change depending on the most powerful champions on your roster. If you have invested heavily into Wukong, he needs to be part of as many solutions as you can create for him. And to that end, maybe the most powerful skill that he has in PvE isn't his buff strip, it isn't his polymorph, it isn't his stun, and it isn't his damage. It is his revive on death. So the previous king of cheese strats in Raid Shadow Legends has to be Paragon. In fact, people refer to him as the cheese champion or the king of cheese, whatever. He is a cheese wizard. A cheese whiz. He's a cheese whiz. Okay, so what makes him the king of cheese? Well, it's this A2. He can place an unkillable buff on himself for 2 turns on a 2-turn cooldown. That makes him indestructible. He can't be killed unless the enemy team can do one of 3 things to him. They have to remove the unkillable buff, they have to stun him or CC him in some other way so that he doesn't put the buff back up on the cooldown, or they have to ignore the unkillable buff and kill him anyway. Now in PvE, none of those happen that often, and if you build them with high resists, really high resist, you can usually resist the CCs that are the most common problem for PvE paragons. This allows you to do all sorts of things in the game, can be really interesting, and it can help you as an early game player through difficult fights, say like the Scarab boss that is in Doom Tower right now, or if you're trying to clear Nightmare Campaign and the Mortu Macabre is causing a problem, or you can use them in Arena to just create an unkillable team on defense. There are all sorts of uses for Paragon. And now what I am finding is that Sun Wukong has taken a place next to Paragon as one of the top cheese champions in the game. Here we are on floor 30 of the Doom Tower. Now, I don't have this cheese strat on my account, unfortunately, but my editor, Sun, has used this to great effect, and he's actually pushed through the first 2 or 3 Scarab King bosses now. Now, one of the difficulties of the Scarab King is that you need a shield, preferably on every single champion, in order to effectively take this boss down. And the reason is because of this easy prey ability right here. You can see it. It says counterattacks when attacked by an enemy that has no shield buff. Now, when Borgoth, the Scarab boss, attacks or counterattacks, he uses his A1, and his A1 places an extra hit on enemies that have no shield buffs. So obviously, if you're triggering his counterattack, you don't have a shield buff. So you're going to get at least 2 hits, and the extra hit places a provoke debuff for 1 turn. That provokes your team, your entire team, and then prevents you from doing things like cleansing the provoke or cleansing the poisons that you get hit with, or putting up shields to stop the damage, or any other abilities that hit hard. You basically get completely locked out. And then because you're just auto attacking with your A1 and not getting shields, this becomes a death cycle that just cycles infinitely until your team is wiped off the board. However, this doesn't happen to Sun Wukong. First of all, he's going to die. And when he dies, he respawns with full turn meter and no debuffs. So he loses the provoke that was placed on him. He's come back with full health, so he's not weak. And now he can go ahead and hit. So the strategy that Sun and I came up with for these early levels of Scarab King can be done pretty easily with just 2 champions. You need an apothecary or another really strong healer who does have a blood shield ring. You want that blood shield ring so that when that champion actually hits the boss, they have a shield and they don't trigger the counterattack. You also potentially want to build that champion in high resist so they don't get provoked if you can. And then you have Sun Wukong. And Sun Wukong can be in a blood shield ring. It works better that way, but it's not critically important. As long as you have the blood shield ring on your healer and they have enough resistance so that they don't get provoked and they can always do their heal. So for instance, Apothecary can always heal. That's going to prevent Apothecary from dying. That healer is going to heal tank this boss while Sun Wukong constantly dies, comes back with full turn meter, gets a hit or 2 on the boss, and dies again. So as long as you can keep your Apothecary alive, you could probably do this again with maybe a Rector Drath, but Apothecary is probably better because you don't want to bring in a bunch of buffs against the Scarab boss because the Scarab boss can steal those buffs. So Apothecary is perfect. You don't even have to use the increased speed or turn meter. You will have to manual this fight because Apothecary will typically try to heal Sun Wukong if Sun Wukong is injured, and you don't care about Sun Wukong dying. Just let Sun Wukong die. Apothecary heals himself, creates an unkillable team composition basically by just out healing the boss's damage, and Sun Wukong will eventually kill the Scarab boss. If you want to make it a little faster, put Sun Wukong in a destroy set. I don't know that you want to have him in a destroy set anywhere else in the game. So just resign yourself to a 15 or 20 minute manual battle. But if you're trying to get past a Scarab King boss and move up Doom Tower, this is a cheese strat that can work really well. I'll try to do a video on this to show more of the mechanics of it later on. But again, I don't have the strat on my account. My editor does, so we're going to have to get on his account and show this off. Now, another place where you can utilize the cheese mechanic of Sun Wukong's revive is in Spider Boss. Anytime that you are up against a magic affinity spider boss, you can make Sun Wukong the Spiderling tank. And that's going to allow you to run Spider, keep your other champions healthier, and use Sun Wukong's revive to just tank so much of the damage that the Spiderlings put out that you almost don't have to worry about the Spiderlings at all. Now, I do have this strat on my account, and I'm going to go ahead and show you here at stage 14. So this is my team. You can see Sun Wukong is right there. Now, he is level 50. He is one of 2 weak affinity champions, but because he is weaker than my Deacon Armstrong, he will be the initial Spiderling target. Now, if things go wrong and Sun Wukong dies early in a rotation, a lot of Spiderlings may hit Deacon Armstrong. So this does occasionally fail if Deacon Armstrong gets really weak before Sun Wukong revives. But remember, those 3 turns that get Sun Wukong back to his revive, those will happen whether they're your ally turns or enemy turns. So he usually comes back quickly enough that Deacon Armstrong doesn't get killed. If he does, I still have Jamarsa here who can revive him. And so I'm going to be using, this is not going to be a fast run, I'm going to be using a tanky, slow, cleansing, healing team that's going to do damage to the spider boss over time. Remember that spider damage does ramp up at every time that the spider boss consumes spiderlings. So there is a race. You can't go too slowly here. but I've found a balance here for stage 14 on my account. And this was a really important stage to get to because I had to push past this stage in order to progress in my Arbiter missions. So let me go ahead and show you this strat. All right, so here we go. As you can see, Sun Wukong, their team hasn't really gone yet. We're just getting into our run. We're placing our debuffs. And now when the Spiderlings get their first turn, what is going to start happening is that all of the Spiderlings are going to attack Sun Wukong. Remember that in order to create a Spiderling tank, you want that Spiderling tank, that target, to be weak affinity. Here we go. Everybody's hitting Wukong. And you also want the champion to be the weakest survivable champ, like the least survivable champ of that affinity. So Deacon Armstrong is also weak affinity, but he's level 60. He's really tanky. Sun Wukong is a damage dealer. He's just not nearly as tanky. And so the Spiderlings naturally select Sun Wukong. Now, I have some heals here, so he's not going to die right away, but eventually he will die. But the great thing about this is it doesn't matter if the poisons land. I don't need resist. I don't care if Sun Wukong dies. I don't care when he dies. Every time he dies, he comes back with full turn meter and full health. So I don't even really need much in the way of supporting Sun Wukong. So my team is built around supporting all of the other champions here and basically allowing Athel to do the majority of the damage, clear Spiderlings when she can so that the boss won't get super strong, but then also do damage against the boss. So we haven't actually had a Sun Wukong death yet because I do have two healers here in Runekeeper Dazdurk and Jamarsa, but he will eventually die. It doesn't matter if he dies. If he stays alive, that's great because he's still doing his job of soaking up all of the attention of all of these Spiderlings. So here it looks like he might go down soon. Still alive. There he goes. And now you can see Deacon Armstrong is taking the hits. And then Sun Wukong comes right back and pulls the attention back off of Deacon Armstrong. Now we're going to get more Spiderlings. They don't have a lot of turn meter, so Sun Wukong and Deacon are going to get chances to heal up. Jamarsa will heal them. They'll also get heals off of the leeches from hitting the boss. The one danger here is if Deacon Armstrong doesn't get healed up enough when Sun Wukong dies, then he may get taken below the threshold by the Spiderlings, so then when Sun Wukong revives with full health, Sun Wukong is no longer the Spiderling target. In that case, it's possible for Deacon Armstrong to die, but often Jamarsa will then revive Deacon Armstrong, and then Sun Wukong will have become the Spiderling target in the meantime, and he'll be weaker, and the cycle begins again. All right, so I'm going to let this play out. You can watch this fight. It will win. It has a high percentage of winning. It's probably about 95% chance of winning here. Again, there, Sun Wukong just died. But you're going to see he's going to revive before the Spiderlings even get a turn. And he's going to be the Spiderling target right away. He dies again. He keeps coming back. It's beautiful. It's fun. It's total cheese. But hey, you need cheese in Spider. Spider is hard. So go ahead and enjoy the rest of this fight. And I'll meet you on the other side. Okay, so there it is. It did take over 6 minutes to clear this stage. But like I said, it's about a 95% clear. And Spider is definitely the hardest of the 4 dungeons to progress up through. I'm on stage 19 of the Dragon's Lair and only stage 14 here in the Spider's Den. So having this solution was really helpful, not only to pass my Arbiter mission, but just to be able to farm at a decently high stage here. Typically, I still farm Spider's Den stage 10, but sometimes if I need to get a higher rarity or higher star tier accessory, I come here to stage 14 instead. Okay, so finally, I think one of the places that Sun Wukong is going to have a massive impact is in the Hydra clan boss. Now, you need some way to manage the Mischief Head stealing your buffs and spreading him onto all of the Hydra heads. One way to do that is to create a Mischief tank with high resist. Make sure that that is the champion that's always targeted, and then you can resist the buff steal. But not everybody has that option. And as you progress up through the difficulties, it may be harder and harder to build your mischief tank effectively. It's still a goal. You should still try to build one. But one alternate way of handling this is instead having a buff removal champion and also a champion that maybe places block buffs, debuffs. Now, Sun Wukong does both. So I think as newer players progress into taking on Hydra, they're going to find that Sun Wukong is an extremely effective champion for this role. Now, it may require you to rebuild your Sun Wukong for Hydra clan boss. That may make him a little bit less effective in the arena. So you have to decide if he's going to be your arena nuker, or maybe he's going to do this in Hydra clan boss. It's possible that if you have really good gear, you might be able to get away with him doing both simultaneously. But regardless of how you approach it, he's going to be an early game solution for newer players when they're trying to enter at least normal and maybe even hard Hydra. And I think that's a great solution. It's great for new players to have an accessible champion that can do roles like this for really important fights like the Hydra boss. Now, I do see Wukong in live arena. I am high silver, I think, in live arena on my main account. And I do see him quite a bit. And when he's in live arena, he can really smack. He can do a lot of work for you. So I do think that he has longevity in the PvP area. I think he potentially has longevity everywhere in the game. This is going to be one of those champions that you're going to get a lot of use out of in a lot of places for a long time. And that's a great value from a free login legendary. I think this is one of the best free login legendaries we've had. I think he's better than, say, Rhonda, who was primarily a arena nuker and had spot usage for that block passive and block active skills. Whereas I think Sun Wukong, his kit is just more universally valuable. He can bring you CCs, he can strip buffs, he can bring damage, he has the revive cheese mechanic. It's just so much that he can do for you. So if you haven't invested in your Sun Wukong, consider it. Maybe you can get some of the value that we've talked about in this video out of your Sun Wukong. And I do think that in the future, you will be rewarded for having Sun Wukong in a prominent place in your account's roster. Okay, that is it for the Sun Wukong effect. It is a wide-ranging effect. I think it's really interesting. If you have come up with a cheese strategy for Sun Wukong, definitely let me know those in the comments below. I'd like to spread those to the free-to-play community. I think cheese strats are great. I don't think they're cheese. I just think they're creative, problem-solving solutions for difficult tasks for free-to-play players. Likewise, if you've noticed an overarching, really important, influential effect that I missed on my list, let me know that as well. That is it for me. Thanks so much for hanging out. Don't forget to hit the like button or subscribe to the channel. Also consider joining our Discord community. And remember, I live stream every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Thanks so much. I've been Colred. I will see you in another video soon.